Space Marine 2, in my opinion, is an amazing game whose main selling point is the fluidity of combat. It's also a very punishing game, though, if you get off rhythm and you start getting peppered by attacks. Because of that, people often struggle with survivability in Space Marine 2 when you get to the higher difficulties. I noted earlier this week that I think the best Space Marine 2 gamers would make excellent drummers in real life. Like, a strong sense of cadence goes a long way. In fact, I bet some of you guys watching the video right now are like, hey, I'm a drummer, and I'm also pretty good at the game. Anyways, the point of this video isn't to talk about if you've got white dad rhythm, or if you're freaking Dean Castronovo. You know, the dads might actually get that reference. But rather, the point is to give you some tips for increasing your personal survivability in the game. So I'm going to unpack my tips right now, and in the background, you'll see only substantial and ruthless gameplay on my sniper, as I thought a good showcase for these tips might be a squishy character that isn't leveled up and isn't using relic tier weapons yet, but still playing on the more difficult settings. So let's get into it. Okay, first things first, this game will destroy you if you have a tendency to tunnel vision. It's really easy to pick one enemy out of the crowd and try to focus them down, like usually a major of some kind. But the enemy density in this game is thicker than a dreadnought's ass, and because of that, there will often be a very avoidable attacks coming in from the flanks. And you may think, man, I'm really close to having this major finishable, and I'll get an armor charge back. But meanwhile, you get hit by 3 attacks and lose 3 armor charges because you were so focused on getting that 1 armor charge, so your net is minus 2 armor charges. You lost! You made a bad bet. So one of the best skills that will help you stay alive in this game is learning to treat combat like a 360-degree dance. In many cases, it's better to whittle down 3 enemies over time and limit your incoming damage than it is to focus on killing them in sequence 1, 2, 3, one at a time. So don't tunnel vision, trust me. I'll be sure to include some clips in here of massive enemy waves while I'm playing on the sniper, so you can see even a class based on ranged combat can totally survive while being completely surrounded. One such instance on Ballistic Engine, both of my random teammates dropped down and left me alone as a sniper with a massive wave, and I had to take them on all by myself, but it was actually really fun. Okay, moving on to tip number 2. You gotta master the heavy melee gunstrike combo. Right? Every character, every class, every melee weapon, and yes, even the heavy class, they all have ways of knocking Minoris enemies back and then following it up with a gun strike to get free armor, right? So it's important to know how to loop that maneuver into your routine, but it's also important to understand that there's risk and reward involved. So you don't want to just like take every gun strike that's presented to you. You can be interrupted by heavy attacks while doing gun strikes, and that will stagger you and set you up for more incoming damage. So with the sniper, for example, I like to use the shoulder charge on the combat knife, which you can unlock on the perk tree, to knock back a pack of Minoris enemies and then gun strike one of them for a free armor charge. But I won't go for the gun strike in the middle of like a giant pack of enemies with like majors in it, because their attacks will punish me for going for the gun strike on a little guy. So definitely take advantage of the free armor, but make sure you do it at the appropriate times so you don't end up paying for it. I like to find isolated Minoris enemies, do a heavy attack on them, follow it up with a gun strike for free armor, easy peasy, no risk. Next tip. This is sort of a 2-for-1 here, but you want to A, keep all threats in front of you, and B, provide yourself with a way out. Okay, so one thing at a time here. You want to keep all the enemies in front of you. The more you can see, the more informed you are, and the better decisions you're going to make. When you can appropriately assess the battlefield, you make smarter choices. A lot of melee-focused players, or especially bulwarks, assaults, and vanguards, they have a tendency to like rush into the middle of the pack and then put themselves in the center of the action. What you actually want to do is use spiral tactics, wrapping around the outside of the horde and working your way in while leaving nothing behind you. And moving to part B here, if you keep everything in front of you, then you'll always have a safe direction to retreat to. You don't want to be pushed up against a wall, but you want to leave yourself an exit point that's uncontested, because sometimes in this game, you're going to need to kite enemies and replenish your health or reset the fight so that you're in control again. So leaving yourself a clean exit point is mandatory for preserving your life in Space Marine 2. Moving on to the next tip, you need to learn to lean into your class perks basically 24/7, the whole time you're in an operation. It's super easy to space out and just, attack, parry, dodge, and so on. But the better you know your own perk tree, the more combat options open up for you. For example, as a bulwark, you could just default to dodging a blue attack or trying to stun lock a major so he can't attack you, when the best choice might actually be to bait out an attack and then parry it, because that'll queue up a free shot grenade at your feet, it'll damage the Minoris enemies around you, while it'll then give you a gun strike for free armor charges, even if it isn't lethal. You know what I mean? As a sniper, when you're surrounded, it might actually be better not to parry the attack, but instead to try to get a perfect dodge on it, which will send you into your invisibility. And now that you're invisible, you can do 75% more damage with your first attack coming out of camo, which is a lot more damage for a Las Fusel, to be sure. So to return to our rhythm and drummer analogy earlier, your class is sort of like a unique time signature. As an assault, you may be playing with a 2/4 cadence, while the tactical is more contained in a slower 4/4, but the Vanguard is in that weird 6/8 time signature, and the Bulwark's in 3/3. If you don't understand, that's okay, right? It's all good. I'm basically saying that everybody has their own different cadence. If you want to master survivability, then you're going to need to get comfortable with your class and learn its proper tempo. Next tip, learn your combos instead of just spamming the melee button. Now, to be fair, part of this is on Saber, not you. Like, Saber decided they would only show you the combos for your selected melee weapon while you're literally in the middle of an operation. Yeah, you're like at the battle barge looking at a melee weapon you've never used before, and you're thinking, hey, I wonder what buttons I should push to use this thing. And the game's like, nobody knows, man. But you're in an operation surrounded by a massive enemy wave, and Saber's like, hey, man, just hit the escape or the start button, which doesn't pause the game. You're still going to get attacked, but it will show you like a full move list for your weapon. Seriously, I adore this game, but who the frick thought that was the play? Like, thank God my driver's ed instructor didn't wait until I was rapidly approaching a red light at 50 miles an hour before she told me where the brake was that would stop the vehicle. She told me before we ever left the parking lot where the brake was. Saber's over here like, we'll do it live. Anyway, what I ended up doing was taking a screenshot as soon as I loaded into an operation of the combo sheet and then pulling it up on a second monitor to use as a reference while I was playing. I know, my console brethren, I do apologize. You'll have to take the picture on your phone. But either way, take the time to examine the combo sheet for your melee weapon. A lot of perks in your melee tree will change up the combos or give them added benefits provided you know how to queue up that specific move. So this is about knowing all the tools at your disposal to help keep you alive. But you can't do that if you've never opened your tool belt to see what's in it. You feel me? Alright, next tip. Cure your mortal wound, bro. Some people still aren't aware of this, but you can only go down so many times before you just die outright. How many times you can go down depends on the difficulty level that you're playing at. Ruthless, for example, will only allow you to go down one time and get picked up by a teammate. Go down again, and you're out of the operation for 2 minutes, assuming your teammates can survive without you for that long. So don't put your teammates in that situation. You can cure a mortal wound by using 2 Medicae stims, and that will reset your mortal wound. You can also use Guardian Relics to pick yourself up from a downed state and reset the mortal wound. So it definitely pays to look around the map for Guardian Relics and then memorize their spawn locations. So it definitely pays to look around the map for stims and Guardian Relics and memorize their spawn locations. But you may not know how to tell if you have a mortal wound. No problem. The game will literally tell you after you go down, hey, you received a mortal wound. But if you can't read or you missed the text, just look at your health bar. It will have a sort of DNA or infinity looking symbol if you're good. But if you have a mortal wound, it will instead show a skull, so bear that in mind. Next tip, do everything you can to keep your teammates alive. Now this is easier said than done, honestly. People can naturally be selfish, even when they don't mean to be. So you're going to have to be intentional here. If you have full armor and you and a teammate are wailing on a major or an extremist, and now that enemy can be executed, hey, leave it be. Let the other guy get the finish. Let him execute it. If you're at full armor, there's nothing to be gained. Let the other guy do it. He probably took some damage if you took none. You may be over there like, oh man, I'm so good, I didn't take any damage. Just because the thing wasn't targeting you. And I know some of you are like, nah man, that's my kill, I'm taking that kill. Listen buddy, at the end of the operation, when that screen pops up, nobody's gonna care that your kill count says 260 instead of 261. Literally nobody cares. Let your teammate finish the guy if you're full health. Similarly, you can hold tab or the trackpad or whatever and see what items everyone has. If you have a stim and nobody else has a stim, then tag the stim that you just found for your teammates so they can pick up the stim. If someone has very little health and you have full health and you find a stim, ping the stim instead of picking it up. You may think you're the Terminator and that you're God's gift to gaming, but when a teammate goes down because they didn't have a stim or a relic because you snatched everything up, and now you have to take on a massive wave all by yourself, you're probably going to regret having the aggro of 60 enemies on you and wish you had handed that stim off to somebody else. So do what you can to keep your teammates alive in and out of combat. That's what brothers do. I think it's Straven or Quartus in the game that says he can think of no dishonor greater than letting his brothers down. Embody that. Even Scipius says he prefers his squad mates in one piece. So make it happen. And the final tip for staying alive in Space Marine 2, you're going to want to run fencing melee weapons or balanced melee weapons. Do not run block, right? There's only one class I believe can make block melee weapons really work well, and that's Assault, speccing specifically into gunstrike damage and perfect dodges. Other than that, make sure you can easily parry incoming melee damage. This will help keep you alive. Parries will knock back enemies around you, even the ones you didn't actively parry. It will give you some breathing room, queue up a gun strike for some extra damage or armor, maybe even both if you're an assault or a bulwark. So make sure you're selecting the best tool for the job. That's likely a fencing melee weapon, but if you're really good at timing those attacks, then you can run balance and get some extra damage too. And there you have it. Those are my best tips for staying alive in Space Marine 2. There's no one top trick that will just like suddenly make you unkillable. It's about discipline and stacking all of these things on top of one another to make it happen. If that sounds overwhelming, then do it one part at a time. Make a list and start going down the list. Do an op where you focus only on tip number 1. Then do an op where you add tip number 2 into the mix, and so on and so forth. I'll never forget the advice my guitar teacher gave me once. He said, being an excellent musician is about stacking. You start with something really basic, and then you practice it, and you practice it, and you practice it until you have perfected it. And once it's second nature, then you add just one new technique into the mix. And you focus on that one new technique until it's perfected and it's second nature. And then you add in one more, and then one more, and then one more, until eventually you have this extremely complex and layered skill set. And I have found that advice to have lateral applications to other things in life, like gaming, for example. And Space Marine is no different. So thanks for watching the video today, and a warm welcome to the now more than 2,000 new subscribers to the channel. I sure do appreciate your support, and it means a lot to me. Also, big shout out to our new Discord community that's constantly gaming together and leveling up and running ops together. It's so cool to see you all journeying through this game together, and I've had a blast playing with many of you and getting to know some of you this week. If you'd like a community to get involved with that's positive and ready to grind this game together, hey, check out our Patreon page, which links you to the Discord. It's super cheap. It's only $3 to access the tier that will give you access to the Space Marine stuff. We've got about 50 new people in our group, and everyone I've played with so far has been super chill. I'll leave a link in the description and the pinned comment if you want some people to run with. Some folks want to use the live chat rooms to talk while they game with teammates. Others just drop a join code so you can just join and focus on playing and know that you have a good teammate doing the same thing but not actually actively on comms if you're antisocial. Just know that you're only allowed to have one Patreon page. So for me, that means that I had to use my whiskey review page for this. So don't be confused by that. Just select the $3 tier and you'll be good to go, and DM me on Patreon if you have trouble linking your Discord account, and we'll get you taken care of. Thanks again, brothers. Be warm and well-fed. Courage and honor. Bye-bye.